That mistake we made in 2023, we shall correct it.
There is a question many people are asking about Rivers State politics today. Why did Siminalayi Fubara step away from the race for a second term? And what role did Nyesom Wike play in that decision?
I want to assure you here that we're working together. There's nothing like party here. It is renewed hope family.
Because when you look at the story from the outside, it is difficult to understand how two politicians who once worked together so closely ended up here. Wike was the governor of Rivers State before Fubara. He supported Fubara's emergence as governor in 2023. At the beginning, everything appeared to be working. Fubara became governor. Wike moved to Abuja as a minister, and many people expected the political relationship between the two men to continue. But that relationship did not last. Not long after Fubara became governor, disagreements began to emerge. At first, it looked like a normal political disagreement, but gradually it became much bigger. There were disagreements involving the Rivers State House of Assembly. There were political camps. There were lawmakers loyal to different sides. There were attempts to remove the governor from office. And eventually, the disagreement between Wike and Fubara became one of the biggest political crises in Nigeria. So what really went wrong? This is where we need to look beyond the public statements. Wike had built a strong political structure in Rivers State during his 8 years as governor. When Fubara became governor, he inherited that political environment. But as Fubara settled into office, he also began to establish himself as governor. And that is where the problem may have started. One side wanted political loyalty and continuity. The other side wanted the freedom to run the government. That does not automatically mean one person was right and the other person was wrong. But when two powerful political interests begin moving in different directions, conflict becomes almost inevitable. The situation became so serious that President Bola Ahmed Tinubu had to intervene, and a peace agreement was reached in December 2023. For a while, it looked as if the crisis would end, but it didn't. The disagreement continued and the political battle became even more complicated. Then came the issue of 2027. For Fubara, a second term would mean remaining governor of Rivers State for another 4 years. Naturally, that would also give him more time to build his own political structure and strengthen his influence in the state. But for Wike, this was a completely different calculation. Wike has publicly made it clear that he did not want Fubara to return for a second term. In January 2026, he said that if Fubara returned for another term, he would be politically buried.
Because if we make another mistake, then go and bury yourself politically. I will not allow myself to be buried.
That statement is important because it tells us something about how serious Wike was about the 2027 question. But the bigger question is why? Why was Fubara's second term so important to Wike? Was it simply because of the disagreement between the two men? Was it about loyalty? Was it about control of the political structure in Rivers State? Or was Wike concerned about what a second Fubara term would mean for his own political influence? These are the questions we need to examine. Because if Fubara had won another term, he would have had 8 years in total to establish himself politically. And that could have changed the balance of people in Rivers State. A governor who is independent of his predecessor can eventually build his own political structure. He can develop his own relationships, support his own candidates, and create his own influence. And that is where the Wike Fubara disagreement becomes bigger than two men. It becomes a question of political succession. Who controls Rivers State politics after Wike? That may be one of the biggest questions behind everything that has happened. But then there is another side to the story. Wike has explained that Fubara's withdrawal from the 2027 race was connected to a political settlement. According to Wike, the impeachment process against Fubara was dropped as part of an agreement that Fubara would not seek another term. If that explanation explanation is correct, then the story is not simply that Wike woke up one day and decided to stop Fubara. It would mean there was a wider political arrangement designed to end the crisis. But there is still an important question. Was this a formal political agreement that everyone accepted, or was it simply an understanding between the people involved in the Rivers political crisis? The distinction matters because the APC has said it was not aware of any formal party level agreement preventing Fubara from seeking another term. And Fubara himself has presented his decision as one made in the interest of peace and stability in Rivers State. So we have different explanations. Wike says there was a political settlement. Fubara says he chose peace. The APC says it was not aware of a formal party agreement stopping him. And this is where we have to be careful. It is easy to look at everything that's happened and simply say Wike stopped Fubara. But politics is rarely that simple. What we can say is that Wike was clearly against Fubara returning for another term. What we cannot automatically say is that Wike alone made the final decision for Fubara. There may have been political pressure, there may have been negotiations, there may have been an agreement. There may also have been a calculation by Fubara that continuing the fight was no longer worth the cost. And this is probably the most interesting part of the story. Imagine being a sitting governor with the opportunity to seek another term but choosing not to do so. Something has to explain that decision. Was it the fear of another political crisis? Was it the impeachment threat? Was it an agreement made behind closed doors? Was it simply the price of peace? Or did Fubara realize that fighting Wike and his political structure would make the 2027 battle much more difficult than it appeared? We may not know every detail of what happened behind closed doors, but we can look at what happened publicly and try to understand the political calculation. And from the perspective, the story becomes very interesting. Wike wanted his political influence in Rivers State to remain relevant. Fubara wanted to govern. At some point, those two interests stopped moving in the same direction. The agreement became a battle over influence, independence, and the future of Rivers State politics. And now, Fubara's second term ambition is no longer part of the 2027 contest. But that does not mean the political story is over. In fact, the bigger question may now be, who will eventually benefit from the decision? Who takes control of the political structure in Rivers State? Who emerges as the next major political force? And what happens to Wike's influence after 2027, because that is where the real political consequences may begin. So, did Wike stop Fubara from getting a second term? There is enough evidence to show that Wike strongly opposed Fubara's return and openly said he did not want him to contest again. There is also Wike's claim that Fubara's withdrawal was connected to a political settlement. But whether this should be described simply as Wike stopping Fubara or as the result of a broader political agreement and calculation, it's something each person will have to decide. And that is what we want to do here at Prime Joe Network. We are not here to tell you who to support. We are not here to tell you who is right. We will give you the story, look at the facts, examine what each side is saying, and allow you to make your own judgments. Because in politics, sometimes the most important question is not who won the argument. It is understanding why the argument happened in the first place. This is Prime Joe Network. Please subscribe and turn on notification bell icon to be notified when we upload our next video. Thank you.